Well, yesterday, during a post-meeting press gaggle with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, President Trump told reporters that the U.S. is dealing directly with Iran and will have a very big meeting on Saturday. While Iran later confirmed that talks were set for Saturday in Oman, the foreign minister for the Islamic Republic referred to them as indirect high-level talks. Well, what does that mean? And what are the expectations for the meeting? Well, here now to discuss this in studio is Dr. Eric Bordenkircher, a research fellow at UCLA Center for Middle East Development. He publishes extensively on the Middle East politics and U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. Dr. Bordenkircher, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
All right, first off, let me get your high-level readout from the president's comments yesterday that they're going to be involved in direct conversations with Iran.
Well, according to him, he said direct conversations. You talk to the Iranians, and they want indirect dialogue. We'll see what happens when they get to Oman.
It seems that they should be eager to want to talk to the United States if he's opening that door.
You would think that, but this is the Iranian regime in Tehran, and they think that they like to call the shots often, and have a pretty big ego.
So we were just talking with General Boykin, retired Lieutenant General Boykin. He's of the mind that you can talk, but don't expect much from the mullahs in Iran.
I more or less agree with the general. I would imagine the Iranians may try to drag Trump along here for a little while. And then there are also, too, I mean, on the Iranian side, there's an element of trust. Trump pulled out of the deal. What is this guy capable of doing? So I'm sure there's a level of apprehension on their end. But obviously, there's a great deal of distrust on our side as well.
Now, when you go into these negotiations, and the president is really good at negotiation. I don't think anybody can question that. But usually you go in with, like you're dealing with a regional man, you kind of game it out what people are going to do. There are certain individuals in countries that we deal with that do not respond in a rational man theory or according to the rational man theory. I mean, the president last time began conversations with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and that didn't really lead to any results. In fact, the guy's more wild today than he was back then.
Correct, yes. I mean, you're dealing with regimes here that are willing to do anything to stay in power. And I think one of the things we need to think about with the nuclear issue in Iran is that when Iran gets bombed, there's regime protection and allows this regime to stay in power indefinitely. So I think there's an element of that involved here, that they know if they get this weapon, it allows them to stay in power.
So is this the window to deal with this? Are we in that window?
I believe so. I can't imagine that this is going to drag out a whole lot longer.
Talk about how neighboring countries view Iran and where they come down on this issue.
Okay, well, with the regime protection that a nuclear weapon would provide, allows Iran then to continue to insert its fingers into these other regimes. At the end of the day, the Iranian regime is a revolutionary regime. It came about as a revolution and has sought to extend that revolution, protects it through the Revolutionary Guard, and the Revolutionary Guard also looks to project that into the region. And initially, when that revolution happened, it was the Iranians believed that it would appeal to all the Muslims in the Middle East, but ultimately it only appealed to the Shia Muslims in the Middle East.
The Sunni Muslims are concerned about Iran.
Yes.
And their ability to exercise that power if they had a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and to create problems. So for the Saudis have a Shia community within their borders, and that Shia community is largely within the area where a lot of their oil fields exist. So this could cause a problem. We've seen it cause a problem with Hezbollah in Lebanon, what it's done to the Sunnis and what it's done to the Christians there, and to just Lebanon in general over the last 25, 30 years.
So Eric, let's talk about what would a post-nuclear power Iran look like? Let's say the nuclear capabilities were eliminated either voluntarily by dismantlement or by direct action, military action, destroying it. How does that reshuffle the Middle East?
I mean, I don't think there's going to be a voluntary dismantlement at this point.
You don't think it will follow the path of Libya, like Libya did?
I think the Libyan model, I think we need to keep in mind the Libyan model is the Libyans were willing to give up all their equipment and equipment related to nuclear procurement. The Iranians believe, and this is, to an element of the revolution and ideological, but also from a civilizational element, that, they're this great historical civilization. And at least the public line is that we deserve to have the capability to create peaceful nuclear energy. Now, obviously, that's a joke because Iran has a lot of oil under its feet. So, but on a public level, there's this idea that we're a great civilization, and among the great civilizations, we should be allowed to have this technology and do what we want with it. Now, the problem with that, and so the Libyan model wouldn't allow that. It's just you can't have that at all. Right now, there's this kind of belief that, well, as long as we don't go through some thresholds, then we can have this nuclear
everybody
energy.
knows that's a facade.
Yeah, and then the other problem too, not just with the regime protection or regime security, but this can trigger then nuclear proliferation in the region itself. So a place like Saudi Arabia, for example, the Saudis have expressed concern about this, and they've expressed an interest in acquiring nuclear technology as well. And the Obama administration and the Trump administration work to prevent this from happening. But that element is out there as well, and not just the Saudis. I'm sure then the Egyptians would want it, probably the Turks as well. And, with all these elements and actors like the Houthis out there, you don't know, it could get something in the wrong hands.
If Iran and their nuclear capabilities, if it's eliminated, that strengthens the hand of Israel in the Middle East.
Yes, the Israelis, because at the end of the day, this is an element of hegemony here and who controls the region. And the Iranians believe that through this nuclear power that they can project their hegemony and power over there's a Persian Arab element here as well, that the Persians will, project power over the Arabs. There's a line in House in Sand and Fog with Ben Kingsley, and you see he's a Persian, an Iranian general who had left during the revolution. But he still holds this contempt for the Arabs, and he makes a comment about how the Arabs were, lizard eaters. So there's this kind of element too, but then the Israeli element, Jewish element as well, and the anti-Semitism and the rhetoric that comes out of Tehran, you can't ignore. You have to take it at what they say.
I think some of those are projecting what would happen if Iran is denuclearized and that power is taken away from them is a little rosy. There's everything kind of falls in place. You get Saudi Arabia becoming friends with Israel. I do think there's some element to that.
Yes.
But I do not think you're going to see peace in that region of the world just by eliminating the threat of Iran.
True, and if the Iranian regime disintegrates and dissolves here, you don't know who's going to come into power, possibly elements of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And the other thing, too, that I think people don't often realize is that Iran is a very heterogeneous society, and that there are a lot of various ethnic groups within Iran itself. So I believe Iran has a possibility of fragmenting across a bunch of different lines, and then it starts to create problems for other countries like Iraq, for example, and their Kurdish community up in the north, and the Turks, and you have Kurds in Iran, and then Azeris, and then Baluchs, and whatnot. So this element starts to emerge, like an Iraq issue.
Is there also the risk that in their wake, emerging to take that mantle of Islamic power would be Turkey?
You could see the Turks trying to fill that void, and I think they're already trying to do that now with what's going on in Syria.
Because I think short of the nuclear threat that Iran poses to Israel, I think Turkey is a growing concern among Israeli leaders.
Yes, due to their presence in Syria and that their interest in managing the Syrian situation at this time. Part of that, is also due to the Kurdish question out in northeastern Syria, and they see that the Kurdish element there poses a threat to their security. But I think their interests extend beyond just the Kurds in Syria at this point.
So what's your sense in terms of the resolution of the Iranian issue and nuclear capabilities?
I don't have a very good I don't have a very good feeling about how it's going to go down. I wonder if there's going to have to be several strikes here, not an all-out war, but an attempt to kind of aggressively push this to being resolved.
And that
I don't have high hopes.
Well, and as I was talking about earlier with the general, when we look at the capabilities that Iran has from their nuclear program, the latest reports suggest that, I guess it was the the IS that was there doing their evaluation, not having access to everything, but they have made clear that they're just weeks away from being able to convert the current stock of 60% enriched uranium into weapons-grade uranium. That's just a few weeks away.
But that's nuclear capability. Then there's another step in regards to putting this on a missile. I don't know what the timeline is on that. I think sometimes we get this mixed up. It's nuclear capability, but then there's another element there. And I believe that the administrations have tried to go on after Iran's missile manufacturing as well to kind of mitigate or curtail this too.
The Israelis took out some of that in that last airstrike, but I think it's to a point where everyone should be a bit concerned about what Iran is doing.
I think very tenuous and similar to what we saw in regards to the attacks on Israel. And we don't know whether it would blow up, further. And there's a little bit of a back and forth, but not much. We have American troops in the region. We still have them in Syria. We have them in Iraq as well. We have them in the Gulf. So that's another concern to think about as well.
Eric, let me go back to the press conference, or the meeting yesterday at the White House between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. That was kind of a hastily called meeting. There were several things on the agenda: the tariffs, Iran, Hamas, and actually Turkey was a part of that conversation based upon the readout of the meeting. Where do you see the Israel-United States relationship?
I mean, at the moment, I think it's quite strong. Was a little disconcerting to see Trump talk so positively about Erdogan, but that might be also to kind of embellish and brush Erdogan's ego to a certain extent and maybe warm him up for some kind of negotiations, because I think Trump has this idea, this MO of trying to be warm and friendly, whether it be with North Korea or Putin, for example. But it looks like that the Americans are going to have to mitigate some kind of modus vivendi between the Israelis and the Turks in Syria at this moment. Because
we just have about a minute left. Syria, I mean, that is constantly evolving. Where do you see that moving?
I think Syria is going to look a lot like Lebanon. I think you're going to have a state, but you're not going to have a very strong nation. So the sectarian, the ethnic identities are going to start to compete with the national identity, which is what you often see in Lebanon, what we see in Iraq, and what we could possibly see in Iran if the regime dissolved there. And what often happens is these regional actors will then provide security, provide support to these various elements, and these various elements will fight it out.
Which makes it dangerous for Israel.
True. Yes.
So that's why they have a vested interest in resolving this the right way.
Yeah. Well, the Israelis have, I think, recognized this and have courted the Druze community down in south, what do we call it, southwestern Syria too. So they know this game, and they've played. They played this game before. They've had a policy to deal with the minorities in the region. They've reached out to the Christians in Lebanon, for example, initially. But it's been a tough policy to pull off.
It's going to be very interesting to see how
Correct.
all of this plays out just in the, I think, days and weeks ahead. Eric, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Tony.